Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin back again. And today we have another special guest for you. We've got Eshwar Segobind from the Sense Without Mind YouTube channel. Now, Eshwar's thing is all about helping people make sense of their direct experiences, even experiences that might be regarded as supernatural or spiritual. So we've had some awakened people on the channel before, but I think he shares a fresh and unique perspective, and I think this is going to be good.
Yeah, I think it's a very grounded take, it seems, and I think that could be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, so we won't keep you guys waiting. Let's get into it. Eshwar Segobind, thanks so much for being on the show. Got a great YouTube channel there, Sense Without Mind. One thing I like to do for our audience sake anyway is get a little bit of a backstory on our guests, and maybe you could talk about kind of like your experience, how you got started on YouTube, and how this whole like no self awakening thing all came about for you.
So, short story, huh? um, and this goes back. Well, I mean, all of this happened relatively early, back in 2017. So I didn't know anything about spirituality, no self, non-duality, or any of that stuff. This kind of came to me from being in a treatment facility out in Lancaster. Back in 2017, I went in for alcoholism. Oh. And then it was a 30-day program. I think I was there for like 17 days. And there's a lot that happened in all of this really happened in an 8-month span, but it's a lot that was crammed into 8 months. So while I was in that facility, prior to all of that, I was busy with work and life. Talk about being asleep and not knowing anything outside of the social norms of going to work, earning, making money, trying to progress in life, and all of the normal things that we take as day-to-day life. That was the dream itself, and I wasn't aware of any of that stuff until I came into like this facility. So like my life prior to that was just all about work, and in this place, like all of that had to be put on hold. So you're seeing about yourself. So there was no cell phones, there were no emails, you're just in that place and you're focusing on this program. So while I was there, seeing therapists and going to these programs there were a couple of meditation programs that they had inside of the facility itself. I come from a Hindu background. That doesn't mean a whole lot. The only thing that really stuck out with meditation, Hinduism, and anything spirituality for me was the Om. And it was the, what it looks like with the half crescent and the dot. So I used to sit on these, there's these gazebos you used to go outside to smoke. And they had this big pot of sand that you put your cigarette butts out into. I would grab some of the sand, draw Om out on the floor of the gazebo, and the crescent with the dot just like stilled me for some reason, to the point where it wasn't really about anything. There was just this like silence that drew me in, and I was like, whoa, what is that all about? Man, I just kind of stayed with that. In that facility, after the program was done, I ended up staying at a recovery house in Ephrata in Lancaster County. So in that space is where I started to get into what was being referred to as spirituality. So started listening to like Eckhart Tolle and Alan Watts and all of that stuff. But I went through an AA program. So there's 12 steps to it. So as I was listening to some of these like spiritual teachers and guidance and going through the process of AA's 12 step, which is, it's the same exact thing. What you're doing in meditation is what they're doing actively in the 12 steps. So there is this thing called inventory, where you're taking inventory of yourself. And they have this thing that's called defective characters. I was like, as you're writing down and you're taking inventory, I'm like, if this is a character that has all these defects, the thought that came across is, why am I trying to fix this character? It's a character. Just do away with the character itself. And as that thought kind of crossed my mind, all these different identities that I had. So, and I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that. Like the way that you are, if you're married or you have a partner, it's not the same way you are when you're with, let's say you have your child, or you're not the same way with your mom or with a group of friends if you're hanging out at the bar. And those are the things I started to see, that all of these things were just ideas. They're ideas and concepts that made up this this thing that I was calling me. And once I saw through that, it was like, okay, that's like step one. So what's really here then? If all of these ideas have gone away and I'm not any of these things, what remains? What's that thing? And that's when the real intense looking and searching and breaking down of experience led to what unraveled. And there were a couple of key things that happened. One experience was sitting down in my truck at the recovery house, and just this is like an energetic opening, and I was just kind of meditating. There was a particular meditation that I was doing, and it felt like a bolt of lightning shot out from the earth through my feet, through the top of my head, and reset everything. My body shook, and then I like went into the recovery house, and I was like, I was in the dining room just looking at a wall. I thought it was like 5 minutes. It was like some of the guys were like, "You've been looking at the wall for like 45 minutes." It's not that, nothing didn't exist or all of this stuff just blanked out. It was like the conception of me or all these ideas just ceased. And there was just, again, this like stillness that was here that pervaded everything. And, that was one energetic experience. Another one was um, walking up and down the stairs. So I was doing, this is just like a walking intent kind of thing to remain focused with all of my senses. And I was walking up the stairs at my slippers on. So I would take a step up one stair, take my slippers off, walk up the other steps, go back down, put my foot back in the slipper, and go back up. It was just like a practice to be present in the actions that I was doing. And when I got up to my room, I was staying in a house with like 17 other people. And in my room, it was, I think, five of us, and we shared bunk beds. I was on the lower bunk. I got up. I looked at my hand. Dude, it was like the first time I was seeing it. It was like looking without concepts. I was like, hmm. And there were many, 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 many experiences like that. But the one that I went through looking and searching and trying to see all of this stuff from all of these teachers. I started getting into Buddhism and all these different spiritual teachings themselves, but I really didn't understand them. So one day after I'd left the recovery house, I was back home in Philadelphia, and I was laying in my bed, and I was like, you know what? I don't know what any of these teachers are really talking about. The only thing I could know is my experience of what's happening right now. So let's go with that. So you already know that you're not these ideas and concepts of anything on the external world that you can pull information from and say that that's you. So that was put aside. So what's left? So it was memory. So I was like, all right, let's go back in memory. Let's see what's really here. So I remembered myself in that present moment. Then I started going back, and it was like milestones when I was 24, which is when I moved from New York to Philadelphia. Then it was when I was 17, then 10. Then like 4 or 5 years old, I got to a memory. And the memory wasn't really all that important. but the 4 or 5 was. And that was like the first thing I could remember as far back as I could go. And I was like, well, if I'm already 4, what was there before that? And that stillness came. And then it was like my mind pushed against something that it couldn't go past because it came after. It's a byproduct of knowledge, experience, culminated and put together into this thing that's experiencing this world. But it couldn't go prior to its conception. And I just stayed there, focused, breathing, and it felt like a rubber band that was being pulled like this, and then somebody just cut it. And the entire thing unraveled. Manifestation, everything physical, experiential, the entire thing just unraveled in like an instant. And then it started to put itself back together. And as it was doing that, it was, everything was just revealed. How this was put together, how this is a creation of this mind, this thing that puts something together that really isn't anything. It's a weaving of smoke. It's experiencing experience. And then this thing comes. So it was like something that just couldn't be spoken about. Then this sense, then a sense of self, and then the entire manifestation. But it's all, it's like it's a weaving of a error of perception. And with that, like, I was like, I would say 98% of things that I would have ever worried about just went. It just went away because it was seen that it was error perception. It isn't what we think that it is. And there's nothing that can really be said about it. It's an experiential thing. And until it's experienced, the release and the hold is never let go of. And because, I heard about all of this stuff, but I really didn't know what it meant. But when I went and I looked, and it was the one that went to look is the one that got dissolved. And what remained is what is.
I can't stand when people say, just as you were saying, something happened there. But just as you were saying that, something happened. I felt like when you got to the part where you said that you got to your earliest memory, and then you said, well, what's prior to that? And then the elastic band being cut, and then everything prior to that. As you were speaking, I felt like there was something very powerful in that. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your story. If there was,
man, that's the thing. Like when this entire thing kind of coalesces and you come back to it, is all of the holding patterns that gets released. 99% of, and I'm not talking, there is physical suffering, but I would say about 99% of what we suffer is in these stories that we create about what's happening and who it's happening to. And man, like when that thing happened, it was just like, what?
I get the sense that, so I'm assuming that going forward we can talk to you as a awakened person. Like with that's the position where. Are you awakened?
I'm just a dude. like everybody else. I just went and looked. You know what I mean? I don't see this as being like enlightened or awakened, right? Or however we can put it, because when we do that, we kind of put it out of reach. But it's available to everybody. Like all you got to do is go and look.
And so that's part of the reason I asked that, because I don't want to put on you that you're a concept. You're like, I'm not a concept. And so, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth either, but the reason I say that is that it seems that from the perspective of an enlightened person or awakened person, that I get the sense almost like the ego is an illusion. It's like, it's not real, but it feels awfully real to somebody who's suffering the ego. And then that sometimes once the illusion is seen through, the smoke is seen through, that it's like, what was I doing? Like, what was that? But it feels so dense when you're not awakened. That collection of characteristics, that collection of memories, it feels heavy. It feels solid. And it's operating the machinery, So, anything to say after that?
One thing that kind of stuck out in your story was you kind of went through this phase where you were listening to Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle and stuff like that, and I feel that's kind of where the road ends for a lot of people. They get stuck on spiritual, ideas and concepts, and then they get sidetracked by that. And I was wondering, how did you accelerate so fast? How did you get beyond that and then, move? Because it seems like everything kind of moved for you, very swiftly. And it doesn't seem to always be the case, really.
Well, I think one of the things that really helped out immensely was I didn't have a whole lot of spiritual training and knowledge. And there was always this thing within me to never stay static. So it was like, all right, all of these are experiences. So if I hold on to any one of them, then this thing is always flowing. So that's another position to hold, another view to kind of sit and bind yourself with. So, and also I didn't have the expectations because I didn't know what I was looking for. It was just like, all right, let's go see what this was about. Because, I mean, you got to understand, man, life prior to this was just so chaotic, with drinking and all of the stuff that was going on. So when this kind of opened up, it was like the same type of energy in the chaos just got put towards trying to figure out what this was. And it was like, all right, how do you figure out something that you can't accept any single point in it? I was like, well, I have that curiosity to go and look, and I really don't have an expectation to see anything. And I think that's what helped immensely, because I just didn't believe what people were saying. It was like, all right, let's go try it out and see what happens. Let's experience what's going on. And then, man, it was, when you see the inner workings of ideas and concepts, and there isn't anything wrong with it, but just to see how it works, because I'm a little bit of a technical kind of person because of the trade that we're in. So like understanding the mechanics of things is what brings knowledge to it, and it kind of illuminates it so you're not so much in the dark anymore. So it was like, all right, so how is it that my mind works? I didn't care what anybody else was saying about how their mind works, but show me how I can use that tool so I can look back at myself to see it within myself so I understand it. And I think a lot of folks, they get stuck on, well, this person said this and it's supposed to be this way and this experience is supposed to look like that, and it doesn't match up with what you're saying. But nothing that anybody says really is it. All they're saying is take it and go and look and find out for yourself, so they can get caught up in the dialogue. I wasn't about being caught up in the dialogue. I wanted to find out.
So in some sense, the pointing that awakened people do, where it's kind of like, some things stand out to me, like disidentifying without getting out of the trap of the mind and then getting to a kind of experiential state. Some of it actually seems kind of straightforward. Like it doesn't seem straightforward till it does. It's like, okay, I'm hanging on to every thought. I'm totally identified with all these processes. I'm like lost in the house of mirrors. And then if I can just literally go from like hanging on to release and in present moment, in the present for the first time in my life, because most people are lost in the past and the future, but I'm actually here, finally, unencumbered by being possessed by my mind. Like that seems to be what's being pointed to. For me, I feel like you can almost, to me, the word Satori comes to mind. Like I've been meditating before and had a sense at the top of my head, like almost like, especially oddly enough, if I just, because I'm don't really like to curl my legs into a pretzel and meditate in old fashioned ways. But if I actually just sit myself up straight and I'm looking at my mind, sometimes an expansiveness starts to happen. But the state of being, I was wondering if you could talk about it, of true non-dual experience, and true blissfulness, and how would I put it? Something seems to be missing. It's like it's not very hard for me to be re-identified with the character, and acting. It's not hard for something to strike a nerve. I'm still watching processes of anxiety happen and watching processes of fear happening. And what would you say to somebody that's sort of at that place where they've got some meditation practice behind them? They're starting to see kind of how it is. They're taking themselves out of the matrix to some degree and looking to really take the final step. Like, just a secondary add-on, I was saying to James, sometimes it feels like you're preparing for your own funeral. It's like one big funeral procession. You go from the state of survival, living hand to mouth, to establishing yourself, and then you sort of see the limits of that, and that gets you interested in obscure things, and all of a sudden you stumble across spirituality, and the whole while, and it's not always the case. Sometimes it's bad lifestyle. That was an aspect for me, seeing how futile, like loving my sins to death and being like, well, what now? Similar to your story. And then getting to this place where it's like, I'm getting somewhere, but I also know I can't build an ego out of that. I can't be like, I'm getting somewhere. And, there's so many tricky ways the ego reestablish itself, a spiritual ego. Is there anything you could say to somebody like that? I guess I'm sort of being selfish here by asking this question, but maybe, there's other people that feel similar. What do you do to go to the place where you finally make some kind of leap where the experiences are like having something shoot out of the top of your head and, enter into this new state of being?
Well,
if that's even what it is.
The way you started off initially is this is welcome to being human. I mean, the feelings and the emotions and all of the things that we have that constitutes this this being that's here, that's experiencing this life, because all of this is happening right here and right now. So it's a culmination of the totality of your experience right now with everything that's happening, just without this little thing that's grabbing onto all of it. And it may slip here and there, but that's okay. Where else is it going to slip from? This is all that there ever is here and now. So there are different things to do to kind of see that in your actual direct, aware, conscious experience. And there's a level of discomfort that comes with that when somebody hears that they can actually do it right now. And they're like, they may get a little afraid, but you were never a thing to begin with. So how are you going to prepare for something that never was? So all of these ideas that we have, even the things that I talk about with the experiences that I went through, the mystical ones and all of them, they're just experiences. So in the present moment right now, we can come back to our senses. And if we take a breath and we look right now, you can break all your senses back down to their basis. And this is something that's available to everybody. That's why I say, like, there's nothing special about this. I'm nobody special either. It's just, I wasn't running for the light shows of all of the mystical experiences that was promised by everybody. It's a simple thing to look and see that out of your eyes right now, the only thing you can ever confirm are colors, shape, and form. There are these sounds that are happening. And in this process we have that's called hearing, they're only sounds. There's a process that's called thinking. In that process, there are only thoughts. And you could go on with the other sense perceptions. But at the basis, that's what it is. And as we're looking, this observer comes up. The thing that says it sees. It wants to jump. It'll jump from seeing to behind the eyes. Then it'll jump into this thing that's called awareness. which is a process that's also occurring, which is pristine and clear, but it's a process. And then when it can't jump from awareness, it'll go to it's everything. Can't be found, still can't be found. And as you just remain in your senses, the thing that you call ego, the idea of this mental image of yourself, it's an idea of a mental image. It's left alone. Everything is as it is. Nothing really needs to be changed. But you have to look and see for yourself. And that's the understanding that we come to. Nothing ever needed to be changed. Everything is perfect as it is. It's this thing that's unifying it, that's weaving the sense perception. The five senses, coupled with thought, gives rise to this thing that seems like it's here. And as we relax back into the senses themselves, and it's all the things you hear. Stop and smell the roses. The present moment is always here. Take a breath. You're always in it. What you're looking for is already here. We just refuse to see it because we don't recognize what it is. And those are the tools.
I feel like pain plays a role here. Like some of the things that just help me be a little more relaxed in my day-to-day life is cleaning up my act. Like less self-detrimental behavior, cleaner diet, stuff like that. Even what you expose yourself to, constantly bombard your mind with, all that stuff seems to affect the state of being. But and so that seems to play a role there. You know what I mean? Like if you're sitting around and you're sort of accepting everything as it is, you know, you're without judgment, you're just sort of present. You're not lost in the future. You know, however it is, state of being seems to be a factor if you are identified with your state of being. Like what I suppose I'm trying to ask here is, why do awakened people seem different? Why do they seem less impulsive? If you're still operating from the same mind, if you're still operating from the same body and life situation, why do you get this sense sometimes that, you know, from all the people that I watch, other than maybe someone like Alan Watts, who is quite a character, you know, there's almost like an anti-character that emerges, you know, that imbibes, or I don't know how you say that, embodies peacefulness or you know, and then you'll read things that say, you know, talk about there's nothing behind those eyes. Sometimes some people may find it unsettling to be around somebody who's awakened because they don't see a character behind their eyes. And that's kind of also what I meant by seems like sometimes preparing for your own death, the death of your character. So is there any truth to that? Why is the character why is the character chosen after these experiences one that isn't chaotic? And who's doing the choosing, for Pete's sake?
No one is doing the choosing. That's the thing. So it seems peaceful because the natural state is something that really isn't chaotic, that's trying to move with anything. So the condition of things are seen. And when you see that all things are due to condition, this thing that says that it chooses and it's making decisions kind of go out the window, because our entire life is constructed around this concept that we do things, we gain things. We're the one that chooses our destiny, and you know, whatever it is that we do has importance and have value. And I'm not saying that so long as you're in that mind identified state of believing that, then your reality will appear that way. That's how choice is. So long as you believe that you have choice, the illusion of choice appears to you. Is when you start to see through these things for what they are by seeing the condition of things, then it's almost like we just relax. People have this conception that they're trying to free themselves from the mind. You're trying to free the mind from the concept of you. You're the one that's holding on to something that isn't there. And that's what I think some folks don't really get. It's the other way around. Our thinking shifts. It shifts from this thing that's trying to change everything to really look and see. And this isn't a like, oh, just sit and be zenned out and all of that stuff. There's an actual looking and deconstructing of your physical experience that you're doing when you're sitting and you're observing your sense perceptions for what they are. Seeing that it's not seeing just sitting and be like, colors. Look and see, then confirm in your experience, left, right, up, down. The only thing that you see, including what you're taking this physical body to be, is colors. You're not throwing it away. You're just recognizing what's happened. There's this error in perception. And again, like our entire way of being for however long until we came to look at this stuff, it's so conditioned in one way that it's sometimes difficult to see out unless you're open. And there's many aspects to this. Doing the emotional work, looking at oneself and making adjustments and changes puts you in a place where seeing can occur more easily, opposed to sitting in mental chaos and not knowing how these functions are, how these things function. And then you can go and then, you know, see what somebody's saying and then apply it to yourself and like, that's how this functions. So you're no longer holding on to something. You're no longer fighting it. You see it for what it is. You're like, all right. So thoughts, that's one that everybody holds on to. It's a difficult one to see out of. It's to see through it or to kind of let it go. And it's like, well, it requires effort. It's not just sitting and be like, thought. Actively look and see. Well, ask yourself then, what's my next thought's going to be? Sure, you've heard that. That little gap that comes up, that's the space that you remain in. But that's the space that you see from. That's where you're observing the thoughts. When you see that, you're like, okay. You may get caught again, but you come back to that place. That's the default setting. That's not a place you're trying to get to. That's a place you've always been.
Yeah, that's really profound right there.
So would you say then conditioning is the biggest hindrance towards awakening? And if it is the biggest hindrance, what are like some tools or exercises we can do to help break that conditioning?
So conditioning is your biggest support in all of this.
Okay.
Because if you weren't conditioned, how would you know to go look and see? And again, you come back to your basis. The primary condition is the formation of this identity or this sense that we have as being something separate, being something outside of this. And that's formed in your sense perceptions. That's formed in the basis of the senses. Because how are you going to find yourself right now? What tool are you going to look to see that, all right, this is me here?
Your
The
mind,
information
your brain.
You're going to pull from your sense of yourself that you're feeling right now, and then all of these things that you're using to say that this is me. Oh, well, this body, this mind, these feelings, this life. You know, that's a little bit more external, but you're moving away from you when you say life and others and all of that. So you come back to you come back to the senses. Senses lead you right back here. When you start to sit with them, well, that's when things really get interesting. Sit in your visual field and just observe and relax your mind. The thoughts, if they come, all right. There's this thing called a tree. I can say tree, and then you may have a mental image of a tree. But go outside and look at a tree and relax the concept tree. Meaning the concept can say tree. That's perfectly fine for it to do so. Let it continue to say tree, and you just observe what it's pointing at. That's all the concepts were doing. So there weren't anything to fight against. They were pointing for us to look. We started to believe what they were saying with this process that we create a mental image in our minds, and then we hold on to that. We create an entire world of life, me engaging in conventional, all of that within our minds, this thing that we project outwards. When in reality, the unknown is right in front of your face. Always has, always will be. Just because we have ideas to explain it and say that it's something, we always say this is called that. But what is this before we call it this?
Right. That's like a practice that we were talking about right before that, because there's a microphone right in front of us. You can't see it. And I said, just look at that and call it a cat. Try to loosen the idea of knowing what it is. Maybe that's slightly different, but I find that that's getting into sort of like Zen territory, is like not having so much certainty around things that you can get tied up in and lost in. So are you into Enlightenment culture? Do you watch videos about enlightenment? Do you read Osho books? Do you read about the Buddha? Is this stuff fun? And because sometimes I notice that there's a lot of people that, from the place of a, sort of like proclaimed awakening, although that statement gets avoided. Nobody says like, I'm awakened, but from the place of somebody that's speaking as an awakened person, there's almost like a tantalizing element, like it's so beautiful and it's so amazing and it's this way, but it's really not, because you can't talk about it at all. And then into when questions arise, like, well, then how do you choose your thoughts, if you're in this no mind or something like that? And then sometimes there's almost like a bewilderment, like thoughts just are there, it's like, behold, this one's talking. How do you reconcile that stuff? Is this do you, because it seems your perspective to me seems slightly unique in a way, almost like I could only anticipate what your answer might be, but my mind would be like, I wouldn't be surprised if you were like, I go to the movies and I'm into sports and I live a normal life. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I await your answer.
Well, I get up, I go to work, I come home, I chill out with my kids, and that's it. All the other stuff that I used to do to entertain myself or to add value or meaning or build a character, that stuff just went away. As to your question about enlightenment activities and all of that, I don't read any books or watch YouTube videos on it. How I used to when I first started out, like, because I was looking to find a pathway to see through. And after that was all done and settled, all of that stuff got put aside. But I never really got into books and all of that stuff. But, life itself is the normal stuff is where the beauty is, because that's where life is happening. To be able to, how can I put this? So I have a couple little ones. When I relaxed the idea of me and I saw all these things got thought through of my ideas and concepts, even my ideas of my daughters being mine or being something, all of that got relaxed as well. And then for the beauty of their being started to come out and shine through. And I know that sounds poetic and all of that stuff, but really it's the roundness of their face, the linearness of their body, the like you start to see things differently. And I mean, it's physically, you're like, my vision becomes almost like high def, because you're just relaxing this idea of seeing, and then everything just becomes this vivid, alive, present, moving, like, thing that's always here. And it was so simple that it was here right in front of my face that I went searching for something else that I couldn't see it. But it was because it was so simple. And the mind could generate all kinds of possibilities. And the minute it generates these possibilities, which are infinite in their beauty and horror and whatever you want to call them, that we miss this simple thing that's right in front of us.
Yeah.
And man, it's it's life. That's why I say it's human. You come back to just living regular old life. You know what I mean? That's where everything is. This mind, it has a function and it has a use, and it does its thing. When it's needed, it's picked up. When it's not needed, it's, off running and doing whatever it is that it's doing. You just
And that in itself sounds like a nirvana. Sounds like a nirvana. So I guess my next thing I just wanted to ask is, do you teach people how to get to this place? Do you have a book? Or is, cause I noticed even your channel, I think your channel has the word simple in there somewhere. It's like a simple message almost. But
yeah.
do you teach other than the channel?
No, there's the well, I do some one-on-one sessions. There's times with work because I still go out and work. Um,
Sorry, sense
so
of what is. That's not, you don't have the word simple in your
Sense without mind.
sense without
sense
mind. We've
without
been
mind.
interviewing a lot of people lately. Somebody else must have had the word simple in there. Sense without
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, probably Angela. Angela's channel is simply always awake.
Yeah. Yeah. And you interviewed with him actually.
Yeah, Angela and I we go back, man. He's a
Oh,
good dude.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do some one-on-one sessions. There's times where I slow down from work. We go through our busy season and slow season. So when I slow up, I do some one-on-one sessions to kind of put this out there and people who are interested via the channels. But most of the time, it's like all of this stuff is it's available everywhere. I'm just spewing it out from a different perspective, I think, but it's the same thing everyone says. So I do some videos and post them up every now and again. And when I get slow, I'll do some interviews and that's pretty much it. I don't have a book. It's always the same thing that we were just talking about. That's the same thing I tell everybody.
It's more than enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
What about say someone is just starting to get into spirituality? They're starting right at the beginning, and they hear kind of like a conversation like this. Do you have any recommendations on like where would be the best place to begin an exploration of the stuff that you're talking about?
I think it comes to the individual itself. Speaking broadly, what I found, because it was like a lot of the information very early on it was so confusing because when people speak, they speak to a broad audience. And no one would tell me like what this is about. They would always say whatever it is that they were saying wasn't what this was about. And it was like almost you have to sit and speak with somebody one on one because you get a sense for the person and where they're at. And then you can kind of like suggest guidance depending on what experiences they have. And there's a lot of resources that are out there that are free and available to a lot of folks too. And that's where I usually direct them. People who may have had like a psychedelic experience or they may have had something that happened at a younger age. There's a website called Liberation Unleashed, and all their stuff is free on there, and they have a one-on-one guide that'll kind of go through it. But they do the same thing. They bring you back to your senses and show you your sense perceptions as they are, and it kind of leads you through this thing that's called the gateless gate, where you're seeing through the first aspect of the identity itself, the way it's structured around thoughts. You see through the ego. And from there is when you can really explore into all of this. But if you don't see that, it's very unlikely that you would kind of progress because the idea of you is the block. And if you're not willing to see through this idea of you and come upon that, then the block will always be there.
I notice on your channel sometimes in the thumbnails, I listen to a few of the videos, you talking about kind of like the no self. And I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone kind of on the outskirts looking in on this, and they say, no self? I don't want to be no self. And fear arising kind of within them. And I'm just being honest, like along this journey, I have felt that as I'm, doing this work myself. There's like some type of a inner panic that sometimes stirs within you as you're doing this type of work sometimes. Is there any type of a warning, or maybe you could speak about that, or what is going on there? But
The
what is that
fear,
about?
fear when it comes up, that is a signal that you're getting close, because the annihilation of the annihilation of you is the annihilation of you, and the thing that's going to be afraid of that is you. Make no mistake, what's looking is the thing that gets destroyed. And who wants that? So the first thing that'll come up is fear. But fear is a story about something. Fear is a story about the unknown, and it's a projection about something that's going to happen. And if you believe it, you'll never go and look. The reality is, fear doesn't know, and you don't know. So hold the fear by the hand and guide it through. And it guides you through. So it's your companion in all of this. The minute you see the fear comes up, you kind of like brace yourself, but you're bracing yourself for a story. Fear doesn't know. How can it? That's why the fear comes up. It doesn't know what the unknown is. Who wants to
Yeah.
know? You do. Well, how are you going to find out? You believe the fear, or are you going to go and look?
Yeah.
The point of surrender cannot be taught. When you get to that precipice and it's time to jump off, nobody can make you jump. You have to surrender and either turn around and fall in, or two things are going to happen. You're either going to go and look, or you're going to turn around and run to what's comfortable the entire life that you know up until this point, because that's what you're sacrificing. That's what's being given up. Well, the
But
idea of
that's the
this entire
precise
life.
terrifying thing. That's the
Yeah.
precise terrifying thing, is that because the mind, since it doesn't know, can only grasp it at like concepts and what it thinks it knows it, right? So when you say that's what you have to give up, the life you know, you're like, well, does that mean I gotta go? Does that mean I'm literally giving up these things that I hold of value around me? Like, I value some of these things that I call my life, you know? Sure, I'm not content and I would want more, and you know, I'm after this thing. Peace sounds nice, but but what do you mean I got to give these things up? So when this happens, all of a sudden it's going to be like, bye everybody, I'm giving you up. You know what I mean? Like that, and I'm asking from the perspective of fear. You know what I mean? Because obviously, like if you're gonna go the sort of limited route of philosophy, then you know you may think you may realize that like the body's still here. Or I'll let you take it. I'll let you answer that instead of me pontificating more.
Well, it's that's why this isn't for everybody. So when you come up to these things, that's why I say you'll do two things. You'll either go and look, or you'll turn around and run back to what's comfortable. And I encourage people to go and look, because what you discover is something that you've been looking for your entire life. And the argument always comes to this. So when you're there, the mind presents you all of the ideas that you could fear, the things you can fear to lose. Whether you believe them or not, you're right. So if you believe the fear, go ahead. If you don't, go ahead. The idea is to put them all aside. You're faced with the idea of giving up all of your ideas of this life. But when we're so identified with the ideas coupled with belief, we feel and believe this life is ours. That I have things to do. I have this thing that's important to me. This child I need to take care of. You're asked to look and give up all of these things momentarily to see. But in the moment that you're giving it up, it's not as though you're going to kind of trick yourself saying, oh, well, I'm only giving this up for a few minutes so I could see. Mm-mm. You have to be willing to surrender all of it in order to see. Doesn't mean that it'll be that way forever. But as you're coming up to that, when you're approaching it, that's the way it'll feel like.
Some people would probably be more willing to give up than others, though. Like, from a logical standpoint, somebody who hates their damn life and's like, I'm ready to go, baby. It's either this or actual suicide. I'm not meaning to trigger. I just don't want to, mess around with this. Somebody that's ready to go because they've concluded that they don't want to do this. Would that, is it, like, what does that play? Does anything like that play a factor, or is it almost like a luck of the draw? You know what I mean? Because then there could be somebody that doesn't know what any of that means and is like kind of hanging on to some trust, like I'm officially letting go. I'm ready to let go of this, and they're still playing with their own mind. It's never a full surrender.
Yeah, I mean, the suffering itself is what leads to the giving up on what we think all of this is about and really surrendering. That's what actually brings you to the point of surrender, and then like the mind just relax the hold on all of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, the drugs and alcoholism, people being beaten down, experientially for me, it was beaten down all the way to I didn't know what any of this was about anymore, and what I was doing wasn't working. So, it's surrendering to a process to see, well, if I don't know, let me get some help and try to find out. And you hear it all the time with people who come up with like near death experiences, or they get terminally ill and they almost know, and they not give up on life in that way, but they know that they're going to, so they don't see the point of holding on to anything, and then it releases and frees something in there, and that's how
the best few months of their life before they die sometimes.
And sometimes they come out of it and they have a new, they recover, and they have a new lease and a new view of life, and they don't hold on to the things that normal people hold on to, like a 9 to 5. They see the value in, or maybe not even the value, but they see the aliveness that's all around them, and they immerse themselves in that because that's the only place that life ever is. And this is just a different way to get to that same process. I think for me, it was seeing through all the conceptions of myself and all the things that I bogged myself down with in life. And it was more of a methodical, directed kind of way versus somebody who would face that in an indirect way. But either way, you come up to that. And the surrender point for me was that. I mean, it was, well, I was just curious and I was ready to see. I was like, all right, let's go and see. All of this stuff I don't know. Nothing right now. So,
can anybody potentially have this? Any
yes.
position, rich to poor, sick to healthy, family person to single person?
What about like IQ? Does that play a role in any of this?
I believe to have the ability to self-reflect will bring that, but I'm not quite sure on that aspect. I'm working on something now with my daughter, because the older one, she's deaf, and she signs. So there's one faculty that isn't there, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't understand. But my younger daughter, she has all of her faculties intact, and when this thing kind of revealed itself to me and blew this thing apart, all of the holdings are casting out to them, kind of relaxed, and they're more connected in a way, because nothing is imposed on them to be in a certain light, like they have to do this in order to be this person. The intelligence is left to develop naturally, and it develops a lot more rapidly and more intelligently than when we try to guide it. To see where a 7-year-old is right now, it's like I forget that she's like 7 sometimes. It's like talking to an adult.
Maybe that's because so many adults are childish.
Well, we're always growing up. And my sponsor says, the first 42 years of growing up is usually pretty difficult, or the first 42 years of childhood is difficult.
Yeah. I just wanted to say a quick thing, if it's all right, about, and then I should let you. I've been doing. Part of it's because you've been sick.
It's good. I'm glad. I'm glad.
I wanted to address the person who they're legitimately getting somewhere. They're legitimately Not that there's anywhere to get to, not like that, but let's say they're unbinding, to use a Angeloism. They're unbinding to some degree, and they're starting to see the mechanisms of the mind, and they're starting to be able to be more present, less future obsessed, less past, lost in the past, more present moment by moment, more leaning into being. And then their ego gets stirred up because they're developing a spiritual identity. They're repeating what I just said over and over again. And now they're maintaining a spiritual identity, meaning humiliation happens or a loss happens to them, and rather than honestly reacting, honestly being in that, they're hiding in their experience of the present moment, or they still see that there's ego there doing its thing. Is this just part of the process? Like, what is that? What is it? Is this the ego reestablishing itself? Is that all it does, is constantly build a new thing till finally it just doesn't do that anymore?
Yes.
How do you create do I see a static character from you? Why do you seem consistent? What is that?
Well, this stuff here is your soul conditions, but we can say there are certain functions to things, and these things cycle. So initially, when we get a glimpse of this present moment after we've done these practices, and then we find that our egos kind of like take over, or I'm back, and why is it this way and that way? You gain the ability to constantly recognize and reestablish yourself in this space. Our language is naturally dualistic. Our language is always in a way of, in order for me to convey an idea, I need to stand as a reference point here and then convey the idea to other that's over there. And at some point, we start to believe the reference point as being a reference to ourselves. So it requires effort always to look and to see and deconstruct that the point of reference is the totality of your entire experience, including this thing that's being referenced to as an ego. It's a function. It's useful in convention. So we can sit and break apart the ultimate, which is no other than convention, and we can sit and break apart convention, which shows you the ultimate. They're one and the same. It's not two different things. So you may sit and look and see, oh, well, this guy's talking and there's a self there. Cool. There is. It comes and it goes. It's a useful tool in order to function in this entire society is created on that illusion. So it functions in that illusion. And then we get to see through it, and we can function while not binding ourselves to it.
Do you ever get hurt? Do you have pride?
I don't know about pride. Hurt? Not so much. But do I feel? Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right. I think we covered the main things. I don't know. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss? Actually, I'll let you close it out.
I wanted to just talk a little bit about direct experience. A lot of people, when they talk about awakening, they say that the thing that's being missed is the most obvious thing. The thing that people in general are missing is the most obvious thing. And I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about that. But what is the barrier? Why it seems weird that we're missing the most obvious thing?
Well, the barrier is our inability to look back at ourselves and accept what's really here, because this thing that we're believing us to be is so the hold on it is so strong. So the same practice, like when you observe out and you're in your visual field, right? So we'll just go through that one because it's your direct experience. Looking outwards. Whatever's in front of you, look at it. What color is it? Right? Then this observer becomes apparent. The observer that becomes apparent has the sense that it's you. That's what's not. How do you give that up? That's the very essence of what you're taking yourself to be. By seeing experience for what it is. In the visual field, there isn't ignoring anything. There's a process called seeing. In seeing, in this process of seeing, there's shapes and colors. This observer becomes apparent. It isn't something that's in the seeing. If it doesn't become apparent, you won't know that it's not supposed to be there. There's a process called hearing. In hearing, there's only sound that's happening. The visual field is occurring. This hearer, this thing that says it hears, that's the thing that isn't. But it becomes apparent when you're paying attention to your hearing sense. That's what you're referring to as you. Now you have no ideas to put on that thing to cover it up. It's completely bare. There's a process called thinking. In thinking, there are only thoughts. Well, where's the sense now? Is it behind your eyes? Is it everywhere? Is it awareness? Those are all things it's going to run to. Just sit with that. That's it.
The quality of thoughts and the nature of thoughts. There's something there that I feel would be good to talk about. So you're observing your thoughts, and you go, okay, I got the hearing. I'm sensing the seeing, and then the collection of thoughts, the whatever, the structure of the psyche, the quality of the psyche. Does it change, in the sense that if you imagine somebody that's identified with some tragic life drama situation, I'm hooked on drugs and I can't stop. I'm a traumatized, triggered individual and my life is a living hell, and that's being repeated or something like that. An identity's been made out of that. That is who I am, and there's something I got to do about it, and I got to plug all these holes in the ship because the ship's going down and I got to do something about it. I got to fix everything. And then you're watching that. That's what that's what the observer's watching. They're looking out and they see that in their mindscape. Those are the thoughts. That's the reality. Don't even, I'm going to get agitated if somebody even tries to argue with me that that's not real or something about it. What happens to the quality of thoughts? Does anything happen? Is there enlightened people walking around that are on heroin? Is there enlightened people walking around that are, or whatever that is, awakened, in the present moment? What happens to the thoughts? What happens to the mind? Because I know that we already discussed earlier the seeing through your character, and this is the thing that gets fearful and all this stuff, and but why would the mind change under observation? Why would it change at all? Why would thoughts change when they're being connected to, when the being from within, or whatever, however you want to put it? What happens to thoughts? What's going on with thoughts in this?
The thoughts don't change. It's the belief in the thought. The belief that what it's saying is actual and factual, that it's real, that it's happening.
Isn't a belief a thought, though?
Exactly. That entire mechanism, the link is this idea of belief. That's the entire thing that's seen. You let go of that and then see what happens. You're grasping onto it. You're grasping onto it. What's that?
Which you lets go.
That's what I mean. So we can get into semantics of this, the concept itself. The concept, the language is talking plainly. It's not about which you and that you. The fact is, there's a you that's holding on to this. Let go and see what happens. Until then, in order for us to convey these ideas, you have to use this language.
Yeah.
If not, we just kind of sit and be, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah.
But we won't do that. Why won't you do that?
Yeah. Yes. Why won't you do that?
You're
Ask
talking
yourself, ask yourself which you is holding on to which idea.
Yeah. Well, that might be a hard. I don't know if it is a hard question to answer, but I am curious because a lot of people talk about it as well. That is the actual divine. That's the source. That's the thing. That's God. From your standpoint, after you relinquish all of this, and you're a pure observer, what do you interpret that as to be?
I don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah. And that's
I
the
don't make
magic.
it. I don't make it into something. I don't even make it into an observer.
Do you watch Sadhguru at all? Do you know who Sadhguru is?
Um, yeah, yeah. I watched his stuff like years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I get the sense that he's regarded as an awakened being, and his stuff comes up on my feed quite often, and I'll watch it, and it's like so many systems of religiosity and all this stuff, and I'm not trying to criticize, but compared to Angelo's and your type approach, that's far simpler. It's just like I wonder if you're ever like. What you think of that stuff, like rituals and practice and stuff, because Sadhguru will talk about like different dimensions open up to you depending on where you're at consciousness wise, and there's a dimension of understanding this and a dimension of understanding that, and it's entertaining, and kind of interesting to dabble and practice with. I was upon Sadhguru was talking about it that I think he was a factor in some of the dietary changes that I made, but. What do you think of the metaphysical? Is it just a non-issue for you? And why do you think some people who claim awaken? I'm pretty sure I've heard Sadhguru say, "I got enlightened." What do you think of somebody like that practicing a whole wide variety of rituals and spiritual practices versus somebody that's like, "I'm a normal guy that is living in and everything that you've said"? What's the comparison there?
There's Again, there are many people who are in a lot of different spectrums with this stuff, and we're just talking about people in general that can benefit from all aspects of, even from religion to beliefs to all the spiritual practices. There are different entry points onto this path, and some people get physical benefits from yoga, and that's all that matters to them. Some people use it to the point to still and go through it all by creating the union of mind, the physical, the metaphysical, and the mental, and they kind of still it to come to this and unify everything. Um, there's as many different people on this planet. That's how many different pathways this is. They have access to it, and some people just want to have a more peaceful life. Some people just want to go to a yoga retreat, because that's exactly what it is. It's a retreat away from their normal life, and then find some kind of peace and balance, and then get back to their normal life and live life in that fashion. And all of these teachings and practices have that quality to it. Is if we are intently looking and trying to figure this out for ourselves, and we go that route, we know that they're all stepping points, and we keep walking. We don't stay at one place, and it's nice to be able to have the ability to offer that to people, because I think that's what he does. A lot of people have different opinions about a lot of these teachers, but even like Rupert Spirit and the awareness thing, it's also a thing. I mean, if you're not aware of that teaching itself, how do you see past the awareness itself, or even come in touch with it, where you have meaningful practices or somebody to guide you, and somebody that's living, that's talking about this stuff. So I think it's cool, honestly. How all of this is, because it all aids you if you have the ability to look at it that way. Because you're like in this soup, and you're just kind of floating around, not really knowing what's going on, and then you get this piece of carrot that you hold on to, and you're like, oh, I thought I was just floating around this thing all by myself. Now you're starting to look and see, and you have these different experiences. But if I didn't have people who were saying, the oneness experience, don't you think everything seems a little too perfect? Maybe you should look a little deeper. And then I started to look. They could have said, that ain't it. Um, there is no self and blah, 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 blah. Instead of kind of like guiding and showing, well, look at it this way so you can discover it for yourself. There are also those who, they climb up the mountain and they're on top of the mountain telling everybody you don't need to come up. But you guide people up to show them when they reach the top that there wasn't a mountain that they were climbing. And that's the deal with this. Some people need to be led, but usually it's only people who are ready to hear it. Not everybody's ready to hear what needs to be said or what's being said. Not a lot of people come my way either because of that. Because the things I talk about isn't popular. It's like, there is no you. Well, this whole life is built on this thing that's called you. So it's a tough thing to hear, but it's probably one of the most freeing things that one would experience in their life. It's dying without dying. They were dying.
Think of how much it takes to hold up a you. I laughed out loud when it was just a small part of one of Angelo's videos, and he was like, "You have to like hold yourself as you." It's absurd. Like moment by moment, because that means you do have to be reactive when somebody's threatening your ego. You know what I mean? Like, I watched an Eckhart Tolle video recently. In the comments, somebody said, "What a cute little hobbit he is." And this was like a vulnerable video. He was talking about like a past life experience where he was vulnerable. And one of the comments is, "What a cute little hobbit." And for my mind, I thought, it's amazing that somebody would probably say that to his face and he would not care. Because, you know what I mean? Maybe with practice, some of this stuff, you can get like beyond having to address such, even though the person probably meant it from a good place, it's possible for an ego to take offense from something like that. And so how freeing would it be to not have to hold up this thing as if it's so important and failing to see that it is part of everything else?
Well, there's a maturing of these insights as well, because we can come to these places and have these understandings because I've been there where all the emotions left and there was no real kind of reactivity with anything that was going on here because it was seen through to that level. But that in itself can bring harm because the ones that are around us, they are not experiencing life in that way. And a better example would be this. So initially when all of this stuff kind of like blew apart, experientially, it was whatever was not in this vicinity of experience just did not exist. So when I went to work, my wife and kids just did not exist. It wasn't in my immediate environment. It wasn't a thing that was even considered. Memory wasn't carrying that stuff anymore. Well, I went and told her that she doesn't exist. That doesn't bode well. It doesn't, it's not maturing that insight as it relates to people who still function in conventional life and belief, so it's coming back to this life with those understanding, and it makes you, it brings more empathy. It makes you naturally more compassionate because now it's all about others. It isn't about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting. It seems tricky to me because sometimes you'll encounter somebody that needs you. Sometimes what somebody wants out of you is even like an argument. Sometimes you'll run into somebody and what they need is somebody to argue with them.
Well,
so what do you're like, I could, but let me just think about this. Oh shit, 45 minutes went by because I was staring at a wall. You know what I mean? Like, where are you at? What in real time with stuff like that? Because you have compassion for even the person that wants to argue, or even the person that wants to just be silly, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you can have arguments without the emotional reaction to them. You can have discussions like that. You can also have the emotional reactions without attaching to them. And if you cause harm because of it, it's rectified right away. It doesn't mean that you're like this robot that's moving about life. It's fully engaged. It's with everything. It's with all of your complete emotions intact. It's now you have this ability to, if you engage and you cause any kind of harm in that way, you kind of fall back. And then you have to, for me, man, I had a good bit of friends before all of this stuff. And then after all of it, it was just like, I have maybe like two, three, and everything else is just life kind of like moving, the flow going with what it goes. These things come up, you just handle them in a different way. Can you still get emotional? Yeah. Do I get upset from time to time? It happens. You know what I mean? It's not, it's human. I think that's an aspect of this that can get thrown out when you throw out the baby with the bathwater.
I went to see a movie recently, and I let myself get enthralled in the movie for like super long runtime, and it was enjoyable, but it's emotional. You feel sympathy for the characters, and I'm allowing myself to feel sad and inspired and all these things. And I was like, as enjoyable as that was, I was wiped afterwards from allowing myself to run away emotionally with this absolutely fake story. It's not real. But I was tired afterwards, and a little bit even down that the experience was over. But then sitting there and watching that, oh, look at my body. It's wiped. My serotonins are depleted.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. That same way that you approach the movie is the way that life is approached as well. For me, it's like everything out with that. It's a projection, even, with like my kids and daughters, like it uses the real life scenarios of all of the things that I would ever hold true and have all these value and emotion like invested in. So that's where it kind of presents itself. And then within myself, I know that all of this isn't. So, you have that information, and what do you do with it? Can't do anything with it. You just, know it for what it is. You still feel all the things that you feel, and you're just good with it. And that's just like the best way I can describe it. You're just good with everything, whatever it is that comes up.
That's perfect. Wow, Eshwar, time, I can't believe how fast time went. That was amazing. I just, I want to say thanks so much for joining us on the show and being such an amazing guest. You were great. I thought maybe to end things out, you could let our audience know where they can find you, what you got going on, and all that good stuff.
So we have a YouTube channel, Sense Without Mind, and the website is sensewithoutmind.com. And that's about it. Anybody can reach out. They can send me messages and stuff through the website, or, post videos up. You can watch and leave comments. But that's about it. Nothing special. Not a whole lot going on with that stuff. So.
All right. Well, Eshwar, thanks again. Awesome. Thanks. It was so good to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, guys.